So earlier this week, one of my friends passed away, which was very sad, of course. She was not much older than me, maybe a little bit more than a decade. And I first met her actually when she came to my ordination. She drove from Huntsville, Alabama. That's where she lived. I was her rabbi. And under my time there, she became a para-rabbi, which is what Amy is. And when I was sick or something would happen, sometimes she would lead services for me. And her name was Mary Doherty, and I'm very much thinking of her when I'm thinking about the sermon, in fact. One of the things that I learned about in Alabama, there was a lot of things that I learned when I was the rabbi in Alabama. Thank God we weren't Mississippi, was a saying we would always used to say. But I don't know if you've ever heard of the Scottsboro Boys, if that was something that you ever learned about. Marlene said yes, a couple of you, most of you said no. That's very typical. So in the 1930s, during the Great Depression, there were people, hobos, who would go around the country finding work and whatnot, and there was a slow-moving train through North Alabama, and there was a fight that broke out between white teenagers and African-American teenagers. And the African-American teenagers won the fight. When the train slowed down at the next stop, the white teenagers got off, made a report to the station manager about what had happened. Accusations were made. The station manager called ahead to the next station in Scottsboro. All of the teenagers were moved. They ranged in age from 13 to 19. You can guess what happened to them in 1930s Alabama. When the authorities took the teenagers off the train, they also found two young women, one a teenage girl and one a very young woman, who accused the teenage African-American teenagers of raping them. So what followed was, I think it was in less than a week, a trial, and I say that ever so slightly and lightly, of sorts, took place, and they were all found guilty. The Communist Party of America saw what was going on, decided to say that we are going to reach out and show support and strength, and one of the ways to do this and to change what is going on in this country was to combat racism overtly. They had lawyers who were associated publicly with the Communist Party who took up the cause of these young men, many of whom, by the way, had very horrific times in jail settings in Alabama. This case went all the way up to the Supreme Court. It was one of the first cases that we learned that lawyers are needed to be put in place. Today we take that right for granted in the Sixth Amendment, but lawyers were needed to be put in place. And these gentlemen didn't have an attorney. So what do you think the state of Alabama did? Was they decided to retry them because the first go-around wasn't good enough. So they were again found guilty. Eventually, though, time went on, they were all exonerated. In 2013, the state of Alabama, in its infinite wisdom, decided to pardon them, and they were actually found to be innocent because the truth is there really wasn't much evidence to support them. The reason I share the story in light of this week's portion is in this week we reread the Ten Commandments. We read through that story in the book of Exodus, and we read through it again in the book of Deuteronomy. And I'm always, and when you look at the Hebrew text, there's only one word different, Shamor and Zahor, that we're both either to remember the Shabbat or preserve the Shabbat. Otherwise, it's the exact same text. So why are we repeating it? We already just studied it. And it got me deeply thinking about the fact that we need to repeat lessons in our life for many different reasons. Sometimes, the truth is we forget. We forget to do the right thing. We forget to stand up for justice, and we go along with the crowd. And in the case in North Alabama in the 1930s, an angry mob who were in the throes of Jim Crow laws. We need to reread those laws to remind us who we are. Earlier in the service, we read the 6 stories that were supposed to frame who we are as Jews. And those stories are supposed to remind us to be a good person. Again, we're presented with a life that has a plethora of choices, and we can sometimes choose the easy path, whether it's going along with the crowd, whether it's getting sucked into social media sphere of wanting to be an Instagram famous or TikTok famous or whatever it is. But the point of all of those stories is not to focus on the temporary things, but to focus on things that really matter, to remind ourselves to be the best that we can be at all times. And when I was living in Alabama in 2013, after the state decided to pardon the individuals who frankly were innocent, some members of my congregation got together and they helped fund a museum to commemorate what happened there, so that people who knew about that story, who frankly are usually in their 80s or 90s at this point, because at the time it was a very famous case, whereas people who are younger don't remember or just didn't learn it, can once again be exposed and learn all of these things. Once again, another reminder why it is that we reread those same texts. Because in rereading, we're able to better ourselves, become our better selves, see the best that we can be. I think sometimes it's so easy to want to not struggle with our text, not struggle with the Torah itself. But the entire gift of Torah is that it is a constant struggle. That you can't just think that you understand it. But as we age, or as one of my favorite rabbis with the name Ben Bagbag, I love that name, said if you turn it and turn it and turn it when thinking about the Torah, another saying in Pirkei Avot, you'll see all of the things that you're really looking to see. Everything is contained in there. And what I really think he means is that as we age, as we go through life, as we go through different stages, our needs become different. What we need is different. We have to either A, remember things that we were once taught and have subsequently forgot. B, world around us has changed, and therefore how we perceive and think of it has changed. Or C, maybe we just need the reminder when faced with a challenging ethical situation, don't do the easy thing, do the right thing, even if it makes you unpopular. I say that recognizing that we are less than 90 days before a very controversial election. And I remind us in all of our conversations and we're going to hear lots of news about all sorts of stories. Think deeply and carefully, remember our history, be challenged by everything. But remember your Torah too. Shabbat Shalom.